Good afternoon. My name is Kirsten Whitaker, and thank you so much for attending my culminating presentation. The United States is a country of preparedness. We have infrastructure and countless employees that spend their lives preparing for any disaster that could ever take place. Most of these workers are heard of and honored for their positions. We have the firefighters who train their lives to fight the fires that can destroy our homes. We have the military that protects our rights in other countries. We have the law enforcement that keep us safe in our own homes. But there is one agency that is often overlooked for their service to this country. Those are the emergency medical service workers of America. They consist of volunteer rescue squads, ambulance crews, sometimes paid and sometimes not. Whenever we experience a medical emergency, we are told to call 911 from the youngest age. But after we call 911, we're not taught to do anything but wait until someone answers and someone arrives to help. Nothing else is expanded upon unless you go out and voluntarily pursue first aid or CPR. There's a stigma that medicine should be left to professionals and healthcare workers. This project about emergency medicine in high school is hoping to alleviate that stigma and make emergency medical procedures more available for people of all ages. So the question I was aiming to take care of in my culminating topic was, how can emergency medical procedures be introduced to and practiced by high school age students? My rationale for doing this project, well, I have my own state and national EMT basic certification, and I have recent experience with emergency situations. When I was working last summer at King's Dominion, after finishing my EMT certification, I experienced a man who was victim to a seizure right in front of me, and I was the only person who knew what to do. Luckily that I was there, I was able to keep him from harming himself until professionals could arrive to take him from the scene. I feel that learning CPR and first aid would be very beneficial so that other people would know how to respond in similar situations. Before I can explain why first aid and CPR should be available, I'm going to explain what they are. First aid was first documented in the 1870s by a Prussian military surgeon, Ernst Haif. He documented performing bone splinting and bleeding control on the battlefield. Then there was the English Priory of the Order of St. John, which used to be an old English fraternity that was converted into the first ambulance system. Clara Barton was a nurse during the Civil War, and following that, she began the American Red Cross after she was inspired by the work effort of women joining forces on the war front. After she left the American Red Cross, she also formed the National First Aid Society. As you can see in my slide, I've pictured the United States postage stamp that she was awarded for the work that she did. And then some of the concepts in first aid that you're taught if you ever choose to pursue first aid, and I hope you do, include bleeding control, care for shock, burns, muscle, bone, and joint injuries, and poisonings. Now I'm going to talk about CPR, which is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. In 1740, the Paris Academy of Sciences first recommended mouth-to-mouth for patients who experienced drownings. In 1891, Dr. Friedrich Mass first documented chest compressions, but these were not documented successfully until 1903 by Dr. George Cryle. In 1954, James Elam and Peter Safar performed a study that determined that expired air, or air that you breathe out from your mouth, was sufficient for reviving patients experiencing cardiac arrest. And in 1960, the American Heart Association began CPR training to laypersons and medical professionals. The concepts of CPR are very simple, and it's important that you learn them whether through an official class or through just steps online like I'm going to share with you now. CPR is only necessary if someone is experiencing cardiac arrest, which is when the heart stops beating. To determine if the heart stopped beating, you check their pulse, either on the inside of the wrist or on the inside of their neck, right here. If you cannot detect a pulse, push hard and fast on the center of the chest at 100 beats per minute. You want the chest to press down up to 1/3 the depth of the chest, and you want it to let it fully recoil before you begin again. I'm going to give you some numbers that sort of demonstrate the necessity of first aid and CPR in our country. When asked by a survey, 59% of people responded that they would feel uncomfortable responding to an emergency medical situation, and 24% of those people said they wouldn't even attempt to give help. In an emergency situation where, say, someone can't breathe, they can only survive 6 minutes without oxygen before their brain begins to die. They can only survive 5 minutes without blood before their organs begin to fail. And for both of those short numbers, they are shorter than 8 minutes, which is the average ambulance response time after calling 911 in America. So as you can tell, the difference between an ambulance arrival and death is very small, so every second counts when delivering first aid. An estimated 150,000 people annually could have been saved if they had received first aid at the time of their injury. Some more numbers about CPR are 350,000 people die each year from cardiac arrest. 350,000 people a year experience cardiac arrest, and 90% of those victims die. But if they had received CPR, they could have had their chances of survival doubled or tripled. But only 26% of people who experience cardiac arrest experience CPR. This is atrocious to me because if such a simple act that I was able to teach you in 10 seconds could have doubled or tripled someone's chances of survival, we should really be making more of an effort as a country to be aware of this procedure and how to do it. So why do we want to do this in high school? Well, of those 350,000 cardiac arrests annually, 70% of them occur in the home. And according to the U.S. Census Bureau, there's an average over one person under the age of 18 in the American household. So high school would target a huge age group that exists in nearly every American home. Another study determined that children as young as ages 13 performed adequate compressions that could be successful in reviving a victim of cardiac arrest. There's also an ease of access when teaching CPR in high school because they have access to teachers who are already trained in CPR. They have access to resources of the school, i.e. financial resources, venues, and they could be able to partner with their local EMS services since they're both run locally. And there's also the time to learn it because 79% of 15 to 19-year-olds comply to their required school attendance. So you would be able to affect a huge group of people by teaching it in high school because so many people attend high school. Well, how can this be taught in high school? The most recommended way to teach CPR and first aid in high school is to integrate it with health and PE classes. The cognitive components of first aid and CPR, because they're so hands-on, fit very well into the cognitive components of physical education. A typical CPR course is designed in 2 hours, and studies indicate that 30 minutes can be effective for teaching the necessary skills as well. There are also different ways to teach the courses. You can have an instructor-led course, which has instructor-led assistance with practical application, where they do more of a hands-on approach. And then there's a self-directed, which is video-based, and it has more influence because it can be easily accessed at home and shared with other family members at the home. So you can influence an entire household by giving the student access to the videos. For my culminating project, I had to acquire an expert who would help me with my research and my product. For my expert, I chose Captain Ed Bonham, who was the training and compliance captain for Caroline Fire and Rescue. He also has many other titles and has served many positions, including a firefighter, an emergency apparatus driver, a hazmat operations officer, and he's been responsible for instruction of training. He's been a paramedic, and he's been an inspector for fire situations. He has provided me with instruction expertise on how to best teach my class. He's given me professional connections with other individuals that have helped me bring this project, like Anne Griffin, who helped me renew my CPR certification, and Wayne Wu, who's been instructing me to become a CPR instructor. He's also influenced me to continue volunteering at Caroline County Fire and Rescue, which I currently do at frog level. So I decided I wanted to become an instructor so that I could kind of catch up my high school class and the class before me to kind of like make up for how we missed the opportunity to learn CPR. So I'm now taking an American Heart Association Basic Life Support Instructor course. I will be able to teach basic life support, which is CPR for healthcare providers like nurses and EMTs, and I will be able to teach Heart Saver courses, which are courses designed to instruct laypersons or people who don't have any medical experience. I will also be licensed to teach first aid courses to laypersons, which hopefully I can do in the future. The course I'm taking is a blended learning course with an online portion and an instructor hands-on portion to evaluate my skills. So there were a lot of prerequisites before I could even begin my project. I had to be a current provider in the discipline I was going to teach, i.e. basic life support, CPR, and AD. I had been a basic life support CPR certified until 2 months ago, and then I just had it recertified with the county, so all of my knowledge was really fresh in my mind. I also had to align with an American Heart Association training center, which is a building that has infrastructure in place to operate instructors in and out of it and to maintain a status of skills. Okay, let me write that down. I also had to complete an instructor candidate application, and it had to be approved for me to be qualified to teach before I could even begin to take the course. I also had to be reevaluated in my CPR skills, which I was just a few weeks ago. So what's happening now? My application to be an instructor candidate was accepted, and I've just been accepted in the American Heart Association Instructor Network as a BLS instructor. I have finished the online portion of my class and the evaluation needed before I could do the hands-on portion. The hands-on portion was scheduled for Monday but has been rescheduled to Thursday, or tomorrow. And then after I verify my skills, I will need to teach a proctored class, after which I will receive my certification to teach classes on my own. I came here today to invite you all to my proctored class. Though I can only teach a small class of 6 people, if I have enough interest, I'd be more than willing to teach multiple classes. And if there's enough interest, I could teach CPR or first aid or both. Again, the limitations are that I can only teach up to 6 people at a time, and that it would have to be in my county because I'm aligning with that training center, so that's where I would do the classes. But if anyone's willing to come in and sit in Caroline for a class, I would be happy to teach you. These are my references.